Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her face against the observation window of Research Station Alpha 7, watching the small creature huddle in the corner of the containment cell. The alien looked nothing like the fearsome dragons from Earth's mythology, despite what the initial reports had claimed. Standing barely 3 feet tall, it resembled a cross between a lizard and a bird, with iridescent scales that shifted from deep purple to emerald green depending on the light. Its wings, translucent and delicate as butterfly wings, were folded tightly against its trembling body. The creature had been found 3 days ago on the barren moon of Kepler 442c, apparently abandoned and alone. When the survey team first spotted it, the little being had tried to appear threatening, puffing out its chest and letting out what could only be described as the tiniest roar in galactic history. The sound had been so unexpectedly cute that Lieutenant Morrison had actually laughed, which seemed to deflate the creature's confidence entirely. Now, as Sarah observed, she noticed something troubling. The alien kept pawing at the left side of its elongated snout, whimpering softly. Its large amber eyes were watery, and it refused the nutrient paste they had been offering. Every few minutes it would let out a pitiful whine that tugged at Sarah's heartstrings. "Still won't eat?" asked Dr. Marcus Webb, joining her at the observation window. The xenobiologist had been studying the creature's behavior since its arrival, trying to determine its intelligence level and potential threat assessment. "No. And look at how it keeps touching its face," Sarah pointed out. "Marcus, I think it's in pain." Marcus adjusted his glasses and leaned closer to the window. "The medical scanners show elevated stress hormones, but we haven't been able to get close enough for a proper examination. Every time someone enters the cell, it retreats to that corner and won't come out." Sarah watched as the creature gingerly touched its snout again, then jerked its tiny hand away with a sharp yelp. The sound was so clearly one of pain that Sarah felt her chest tighten with sympathy. As a xenobiologist specializing in alien behavior and psychology, she had worked with dozens of non-human species, but something about this little being was different. Despite its alien appearance, its expressions of discomfort were universally recognizable. "I want to go in there," Sarah said suddenly. Marcus turned to her with raised eyebrows. "Sarah, protocol clearly states that we need to complete the full behavioral assessment before any direct contact. We don't know if it's venomous or if those claws are sharp enough to cause damage, or even if it carries any diseases that could affect humans. Look at it." "Marcus?" Sarah gestured toward the creature, which had now curled up into a small ball, its whimpers barely audible through the containment cell's audio system. "It's suffering. Whatever's wrong with it, it's getting worse. The poor thing hasn't eaten in 3 days." The creature's scales had begun to lose some of their luster, and Sarah could see that it was becoming weaker. When it had first arrived, it had paced the cell nervously, exploring every corner. Now it barely moved except to touch its face and whine. "Even if I agreed, which I don't, Commander Torres would never authorize it," Marcus said. "The safety protocols exist for a reason." Sarah continued watching the small alien, noting how it seemed to be favoring one side of its mouth. An idea began forming in her mind. During her graduate studies on Earth, she had worked with veterinarians who treated exotic animals. The creature's behavior reminded her strongly of animals with dental problems. "What if it has a toothache?" she asked. Marcus blinked. "Oh, what?" "Think about it. The way it keeps touching the left side of its face, the refusal to eat, the obvious pain responses. On Earth, dental problems are one of the most common causes of eating difficulties in animals. Maybe its species has similar issues." "That's actually not impossible," Marcus admitted reluctantly. "The preliminary scans did show that it has a complex dental structure. Sharp teeth, probably omnivorous based on the variety." As if summoned by their conversation, Commander Torres appeared behind them, her military bearing evident even in the cramped research station. "Doctors, what's the status of our guest?" "Still refusing food, Commander," Marcus reported. "Dr. Chen has a theory that it might have dental pain." Commander Torres studied the creature through the window. Despite her stern demeanor, Sarah had always known the commander to be fair and compassionate. "Recommendations?" "I'd like permission to enter the containment cell," Sarah said quickly. "If it is a dental issue, the creature will die if we don't help it. I've worked with animals in distress before. I think I can gain its trust." The commander was quiet for a long moment, watching as the creature let out another pitiful whine. "The risk assessment?" "Low," Sarah said confidently. "It's small. weakened and hasn't shown any aggressive behavior since the initial encounter. I can wear protective gear and maintain a safe distance initially. Commander Torres nodded slowly. Very well, Dr. Chen. But I want full medical monitoring, protective equipment, and Dr. Webb observing from outside. At the first sign of trouble, you exit immediately. Sarah felt a surge of relief and anticipation. Thank you, Commander. I won't let you down. As the commander walked away, Marcus shook his head. I hope you know what you're doing, Sarah. First contact situations are unpredictable enough without adding medical intervention to the mix. Sarah smiled, still watching the suffering creature. Sometimes, Marcus, the simplest acts of kindness can bridge the greatest divides. If this little one is in pain, then helping it is the right thing to do, regardless of species. The creature looked up suddenly, its large amber eyes seeming to meet Sarah's through the observation window. For a moment she could have sworn she saw a glimmer of hope in those alien features. Tomorrow she would find out if her instincts were correct. Sarah spent the night reviewing everything they knew about the creature's physiology. The initial scans had revealed a surprisingly complex internal structure, with what appeared to be a sophisticated nervous system and highly developed sensory organs. Most importantly for her current theory, the creature possessed a set of sharp, multi-layered teeth that seemed designed for both cutting and grinding. The next morning, she stood outside the containment cell, wearing a lightweight protective suit that would allow for mobility while providing basic protection. Dr. Webb monitored from the observation room, his voice crackling through the comm system as he ran through the final safety checks. Vital signs are stable, Sarah. Remember, slow movements only. We still don't know how it might react to direct human contact. Sarah nodded, taking a deep breath as the containment door slid open with a soft hiss. The creature immediately looked up from where it had been lying, its amber eyes widening with what looked like a mixture of fear and curiosity. It didn't retreat to the corner as it had when the original survey team had attempted to approach. Instead, it watched her with an intelligence that was unmistakably aware. Hello there, little one, Sarah said softly, keeping her voice gentle and non-threatening. She had learned from her work with earth animals that tone was often more important than words when dealing with frightened creatures. The alien tilted its head, and Sarah was struck by how much the gesture resembled a curious bird. Its scales shimmered as it moved, cycling through shades of purple and green. Despite its obvious discomfort, there was something undeniably beautiful about the creature. Sarah slowly lowered herself to sit cross-legged on the floor, making herself appear smaller and less threatening. The creature watched this with keen interest, its head tilting the other way now. When Sarah remained still, not making any sudden movements, the alien seemed to relax slightly. You're hurting, aren't you? Sarah continued in her gentle voice. I can see it in your eyes. You're trying to be brave, but it really hurts. As if understanding her words, the creature let out a soft whimper and touched its snout again. This time Sarah got a clear view of the behavior. The alien was definitely favoring the left side of its face, and when it touched the area, it pulled its small hand away quickly, as if the contact caused a sharp spike of pain. Dr. Chen, Marcus's voice came through the comm. Its stress hormones are actually decreasing. Whatever you're doing, it seems to be working. Sarah smiled, though she kept her movements minimal. Hey there, beautiful, she whispered. I know we look scary and different, but I want to help you. Will you let me take a look at what's bothering you? The creature regarded her for several long minutes, seeming to weigh its options. Sarah could practically see the internal debate playing out in those expressive amber eyes. Finally, to her amazement, the alien began to move closer. It approached in small, hesitant steps, pausing frequently to assess whether Sarah posed any threat. When it was about 5 feet away, the creature stopped and sat back on its haunches, much like a cat. From this closer distance, Sarah could see that its scales weren't just changing color randomly. They seemed to shift based on the creature's emotional state. Right now, they were displaying a pattern of soft blues and greens that somehow conveyed cautious hope. That's it, Sarah encouraged softly. You're doing great. I'm not going to hurt you. The alien made a sound that was almost like a purr, though with a more musical quality. It was the first sound Sarah had heard from it that wasn't born of pain or fear. Encouraged, she very slowly extended her hand, palm up, in what she hoped was a universal gesture of peaceful intent. The creature stared at her hand for a long moment, then looked up at her face. Sarah held perfectly still, letting the alien make the decision. After what felt like an eternity, The creature slowly reached out with one of its own small hands and gently touched Sarah's palm. The contact sent a jolt of excitement through Sarah. The alien's skin was warm and surprisingly soft. Despite the scaled appearance, the creature seemed equally fascinated by the contact, using its tiny fingers to explore Sarah's palm with delicate curiosity. "Sarah, this is incredible." Marcus's voice was filled with awe. "You're making first contact. This is going to revolutionize our understanding of interspecies communication." But Sarah was focused entirely on the small being in front of her. Now that it was closer, she could see the signs of pain more clearly. The left side of its face was slightly swollen, and the creature kept unconsciously favoring that side. When it opened its mouth to make another soft sound, Sarah caught a glimpse of what looked like inflammation around one of its back teeth. "Oh, sweetheart," she said gently. "You do have a bad tooth, don't you? That must hurt so much." The creature seemed to respond to her sympathetic tone, moving even closer. To Sarah's amazement, it actually crawled into her lap, curling up like a cat seeking comfort. The trust it was displaying was both humbling and touching. "Dr. Chen," Marcus's voice was urgent now, "I'm reading some unusual energy signatures from the creature. Nothing dangerous, but, Sarah, I think it might be trying to communicate with you on a level we can't detect." Sarah looked down at the small alien in her lap. As she watched, its scales began to display new patterns, swirls of warm gold and silver that seemed to pulse gently. The creature looked up at her with those remarkable amber eyes, and Sarah felt a strange sense of connection, as if the little being was somehow trying to convey gratitude and trust. "I know it hurts," Sarah whispered, gently stroking the creature's head. To her surprise, it leaned into the touch, closing its eyes with what looked like relief. "But I'm going to help you, little dragon. I promise." The creature opened its eyes at her words, and, in a gesture that nearly brought tears to Sarah's eyes, it gently took her finger in its tiny hands and guided it toward its mouth. The meaning was clear. It was asking for help with its pain. "Marcus," Sarah said softly, "I need you to prep the medical bay. Our little friend here is ready for some dental work." Moving the creature to the medical bay proved easier than anyone had expected. The little alien seemed to understand that Sarah was trying to help, and it remained calm as she carefully carried it through the station's corridors. Its scales had settled into a pattern of soft, trusting blues and greens, and it kept one tiny hand wrapped around Sarah's finger, as if drawing comfort from the contact. Dr. Webb had hastily converted one of the medical examination tables to accommodate their unusual patient. The station's medical equipment was designed for humans, but the basic tools would work for the creature's size. Sarah had also requested that they dim the lights and play soft, ambient sounds to help keep the alien calm. "I've synthesized a mild sedative based on the creature's biochemistry," Dr. Webb announced as they entered the medical bay. "It should help with the pain and keep it relaxed during the procedure." The creature looked around the medical bay with obvious curiosity, its head turning to take in all the strange equipment. When its gaze fell on the examination table, however, Sarah felt it tense in her arms. "It's okay, little one," she soothed. "I know medical equipment looks scary, but we're going to make the pain go away." To everyone's surprise, the creature made a soft chirping sound and looked directly at Sarah's face. The intelligence in its amber eyes was unmistakable. It seemed to understand that this was necessary, even if it was frightening. Sarah gently placed the alien on the examination table, where it immediately curled up into a small ball. Its scales flickered between nervous yellow and trusting blue, creating a kaleidoscope effect that was both beautiful and heartbreaking. "The sedative can be administered through skin contact," Dr. Webb explained, preparing a small patch. "It should take effect within minutes." Sarah carefully applied the patch to the creature's arm, speaking softly to it the entire time. "This will help you feel better, sweetheart. Just a little sleepy medicine so the hurt won't be so bad." As the sedative began to take effect, the creature's rapid breathing slowed, and its scales settled into a peaceful pattern of soft purples and blues. It looked up at Sarah with drowsy eyes and made a sound that was unmistakably one of trust and affection. "I think it's trying to say thank you," Sarah murmured, gently stroking the creature's head. Dr. Webb activated the medical scanner, and holographic displays showed detailed images of the creature's skull and dental structure. What they saw confirmed Sarah's diagnosis. One of the creature's back molars was severely infected, with inflammation spreading to the surrounding tissue. "There," Dr. Webb pointed to the affected area. That tooth is definitely the source of the problem. The infection is quite advanced. If we hadn't caught this, the creature could have died from systemic complications. Sarah felt a surge of relief that they had acted when they did. The little alien had been suffering in silence probably for days or even weeks before they found it. "Can we save the tooth?" she asked. Dr. Webb studied the scans carefully. "I'm afraid not. The damage is too extensive. We'll need to extract it. But the good news is that the surrounding teeth and jaw structure appear healthy. Once we remove the infected tooth and treat the inflammation, it should heal completely." The extraction itself was delicate work. The creature remained peacefully sedated throughout the procedure, its small chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Sarah stayed close, one hand gently resting on the alien's arm, providing what comfort she could. Dr. Webb worked with practiced precision, using microsurgical tools designed for the most delicate procedures. The infected tooth, when finally removed, was revealed to be much larger than expected, with roots that had become twisted and inflamed. No wonder it was in so much pain, Dr. Webb commented as he cleaned the extraction site. This tooth was putting pressure on several nerve clusters. The relief must be tremendous. As the sedative began to wear off, the creature slowly opened its eyes. For a moment it looked confused, blinking slowly as it tried to remember where it was. Then its gaze found Sarah's face, and its scales immediately brightened to warm, happy golds and greens. The alien sat up carefully, working its jaw experimentally. When it realized that the sharp, constant pain was gone, its reaction was pure joy. It made a series of musical chirping sounds, its scales cycling through brilliant rainbow patterns. Then, to Sarah's amazement, it launched itself into her arms, wrapping its tiny arms around her neck in what could only be described as a hug. "Oh my," Sarah laughed, tears of joy running down her cheeks. "You're welcome, little dragon. You're very welcome." Dr. Webb was grinning as he cleaned up the medical equipment. "Sarah, what you've accomplished here goes far beyond a simple medical procedure. You've established trust with an alien species through compassion and healing. This could change everything about how we approach first contact situations." The creature pulled back from the hug and looked directly into Sarah's eyes. Its scales had settled into a pattern of warm gold with swirls of deep blue, colors that somehow conveyed deep gratitude and affection. Then it did something that made both humans gasp in wonder. The alien reached up and gently touched Sarah's cheek, the same gesture of comfort that she had been giving it. The meaning was clear. It was returning the kindness that had been shown to it. "I think," Sarah said softly, "this little one just taught us something very important about the universal language of compassion." The creature settled back into Sarah's lap, finally comfortable and pain-free. For the first time since its arrival, it looked truly at peace. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much larger than a simple rescue and medical procedure. As if sensing her thoughts, the creature looked toward the viewing port that showed the star-filled expanse of space beyond the station. Its scales flickered in patterns that seemed almost like communication. And Sarah wondered if somewhere out there, others of its kind were looking for their lost companion. "Marcus," she said quietly, "I think we need to start thinking about how to find this little one's family. Something tells me they're going to want their child back." 3 days after the successful tooth extraction, the research station's routine was completely transformed. The creature, whom Sarah had started calling Pip after its musical chirping sounds, had become the center of attention for the entire crew. But more importantly, Pip had begun displaying behaviors that suggested it was not just intelligent, but actively trying to communicate. Sarah sat in the observation lounge with Pip curled contentedly in her lap, watching the stars through the massive viewing port. The little alien had recovered remarkably quickly from the dental procedure, and now showed all the energy and curiosity one would expect from a healthy young creature. Its scales had developed a new pattern when it was with Sarah, a warm, steady, gold with spirals of deep blue that the crew had come to recognize as its happy colors. "Sarah," Dr. Webb approached with a tablet full of data. "You need to see this. The linguistic analysis of Pip's vocalizations is showing some remarkable patterns." Sarah looked up from where she had been gently stroking Pip's scales. The creature had developed a favorite spot behind what might have been its ears, and it would make soft purring sounds whenever Sarah found just the right place. What kind of patterns? She asked. Complex ones, Marcus said, settling into a nearby chair. The sounds Pip makes aren't random. There's a definite structure, almost like a primitive language. And here's the really interesting part. The patterns change depending on what Pip is looking at or interacting with. As if understanding that it was being discussed, Pip looked up at Dr. Webb and made a series of melodic chirps. The sounds were different from its usual contented purrs, more structured and deliberate. See? Marcus pointed to his tablet. Those specific sound combinations always occur when Pip sees me. It's like it has a name for me. Sarah felt a thrill of excitement. What about for me? Oh, you have the most complex sound pattern of all, Marcus grinned. Listen to this. He played back a recording of Pip's vocalizations, and Sarah could hear a beautiful, intricate melody that was unlike any of the other sounds the creature made. Pip heard the recording and immediately responded with the same melodic pattern, looking directly at Sarah as it did so. Then it reached up and touched her face gently, the gesture it had adopted as its way of showing affection. It's naming us, Sarah whispered in wonder. It's giving each of us our own song. Commander Torres appeared in the doorway and Pip immediately greeted her with yet another distinct vocal pattern, shorter and more formal than the others, which somehow seemed appropriate for the commander's no-nonsense personality. Dr. Chen, the commander said, we've received some interesting communications from Earth Command. They want a full report on our progress with the creature, but more importantly, we've detected some unusual energy signatures in this sector. Sarah felt Pip tense in her lap. The creature's scales flickered through worried yellows and oranges as it looked toward the viewing port. What kind of energy signatures? Dr. Webb asked. Unknown configuration, but powerful, Commander Torres replied. Long-range sensors picked them up about 6 hours ago, and they're heading in our direction. Given that we found Pip alone on that moon, I think we need to consider the possibility that these signatures might be related to its species. Pip made a series of urgent-sounding chirps, its scales now cycling rapidly through bright, excited patterns. It wriggled out of Sarah's lap and pressed itself against the viewing port, looking out at the stars with obvious anticipation. I think you're right, Commander, Sarah said, watching Pip's behavior. Look at how excited it is. I think Pip recognizes something about those energy signatures. The next few hours were tense ones. The crew prepared for potential first contact with an unknown alien species, while Pip became increasingly agitated and excited. The little creature refused to leave the observation lounge, spending all its time pressed against the viewing port watching the stars. Sarah stayed with Pip, trying to keep it calm while the crew worked around them. She could feel the creature's excitement and anxiety, and she found herself sharing those emotions. What would Pip's people be like? Would they be grateful that humans had helped their lost child, or would they see the medical intervention as some kind of violation? Contact in 30 minutes, Commander Torres announced over the comm system. All hands to stations. Pip heard the announcement and turned to Sarah with what could only be described as a pleading expression. Its scales were flickering rapidly between hopeful gold and nervous purple. It's okay, little one, Sarah soothed. I think your family is coming for you. But Pip made a soft, sad sound and reached for Sarah's hand. It held her finger tightly and looked back and forth between her and the viewing port, as if torn between two desires. Dr. Webb joined them at the viewing port just as the first alien ship became visible. It was unlike anything in human design, organic-looking, with flowing curves that seemed to shift and change as they watched. The ship's hull appeared to be made of the same iridescent material as Pip's scales, cycling through colors in complex patterns. My God, Dr. Webb breathed. It's beautiful. Pip let out a cry of joy and pressed itself against the viewing port, its scales exploding into brilliant rainbow patterns. But even in its excitement, it kept one tiny hand wrapped around Sarah's finger. The alien ship moved with an elegant grace, approaching the research station with obvious caution. As it drew closer, they could see that it was much larger than it had first appeared, easily dwarfing their research station. Incoming transmission, the communications officer announced. Audio only, but the signal is incredibly complex. There are layers of information here that our equipment can barely process. Put it through, Commander Torres ordered. The sound that filled the observation lounge was like nothing Sarah had ever heard. It was musical, layered with harmonies and overtones that seemed to bypass the ears and resonate directly in the chest. It was hauntingly beautiful and obviously intelligent, though completely incomprehensible to human minds. But Pip understood every note. The little creature began responding immediately, its own vocalizations becoming more complex and sophisticated than anything they had heard from it before. The conversation between Pip and the voice from the ship continued for several minutes, with Pip's scales shifting through patterns that spoke of joy, relief, and something that looked like explanation. Then Pip turned to Sarah and made a sound that was different from all the others. Sadder, more complex, filled with what seemed like gratitude and regret. It touched her face one more time, then looked back at the alien ship. "I think," Sarah said quietly, tears running down her cheeks, "Pip is saying goodbye." The docking procedure was unlike anything the research station crew had ever experienced. The alien ship didn't use mechanical clamps or traditional docking tubes. Instead, it seemed to grow a connection to the station, extending what looked like living tissue that formed a perfect seal with their airlock. Sarah stood in the main corridor with Pip in her arms, surrounded by the entire crew of the research station. Commander Torres had decided that this first meeting should include everyone who had been involved in caring for the little alien. Pip's scales were cycling through complex patterns that Sarah had never seen before, deep purples and silvers with threads of gold running through them like writing. "Remember," Commander Torres said quietly, "we follow Pip's lead. This is its family." The airlock cycled and Sarah felt her breath catch as the first of Pip's people entered the station. They were magnificent. Adult versions of Pip, they stood nearly 7 feet tall, with scales that shimmered in patterns so complex they seemed like living art. Their wings, which had been delicate and translucent on Pip, were now powerful and majestic, stretching wide before folding gracefully against their backs. But what struck Sarah most was their eyes. Like Pip's, they were large and expressive, filled with an intelligence that was immediately recognizable. And right now, those eyes were focused entirely on the small creature in Sarah's arms. The lead alien, whose scales displayed patterns of authority in deep blues and silver, approached slowly. Its gaze moved from Pip to Sarah, and she felt a moment of instinctive fear. These were clearly powerful beings, and she was holding their child. Pip stirred in her arms and made a series of complex vocalizations, its scales brightening to happy golds and greens. The adult alien's response was immediate. Its scales shifted to patterns of relief and joy so bright they were almost blinding. It reached toward Pip with obvious longing, but stopped when it saw how the little one was clinging to Sarah. Sarah looked down at Pip, who was gazing up at her with those remarkable amber eyes. She could see the conflict there, joy at seeing its family, but reluctance to leave the human who had helped it. "It's okay, sweetheart," Sarah whispered. "They've been looking for you. You belong with them." But instead of reaching for its parent, Pip turned toward the adult alien and began what could only be described as an animated explanation. The little creature gestured toward Sarah, touched its own face where the bad tooth had been, and made sounds that somehow conveyed the entire story of its rescue and treatment. The adult alien listened intently, its scales shifting through patterns of surprise, concern, and then something that looked like awe. When Pip finished its story, the adult looked at Sarah with an expression she couldn't quite interpret. Then the most amazing thing happened. The adult alien slowly lowered itself until it was kneeling in front of Sarah, its massive form somehow managing to look graceful and respectful. It reached out one elegant hand and gently touched Sarah's face exactly as Pip had learned to do. The gesture was so clearly one of gratitude that Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. "You're welcome," she whispered, knowing the alien wouldn't understand the words but hoping it would understand the emotion behind them. Other adult aliens had entered the station now, and they all seemed to be listening as Pip continued its story. Occasionally pointing to different members of the research crew, Sarah realized that Pip was introducing each human by name, using the unique vocal patterns it had developed for each person. Dr. Webb stepped forward when Pip gestured to him, and the little creature launched into what was obviously an explanation of the medical procedure. The adult aliens listened with grave attention, their scales flickering through patterns that suggested deep concern and gratitude. Commander Torres was next, and Pip's introduction of her carried tones of respect and authority that somehow conveyed her leadership role. The adult aliens acknowledged her with gestures of formal respect, but when Pip turned back to Sarah, its vocalizations became something entirely different. The sounds were rich with emotion, layered with harmonies that spoke of love, gratitude, and trust. Even without understanding the language, everyone in the corridor could hear that this was special. The adult aliens responded with their own vocalizations, and suddenly Sarah realized they were all looking at her with expressions of profound respect. One of them, slightly smaller than the others but with scales that displayed intricate patterns of wisdom and age, approached her carefully. This alien reached into what looked like a fold in its scaled skin and withdrew something that made Sarah gasp. It was a piece of crystalline material that seemed to contain actual starlight, glowing with an inner fire that was breathtakingly beautiful. The elderly alien held out the crystal to Sarah, its scales displaying patterns that somehow conveyed the solemnity and importance of the gesture. Pip made excited chirping sounds and nodded encouragingly at Sarah. "I think," Dr. Webb said quietly, "you're being given a great honor." Sarah carefully took the crystal, feeling its warmth pulse against her palm. The moment she touched it, the crystal's glow intensified, and she felt a strange sensation, as if she could almost understand the complex harmonies of the alien language. The elderly alien spoke then, its voice carrying harmonies that seemed to resonate in Sarah's bones. Though she couldn't understand the words, the meaning came through clearly: gratitude, respect, and an invitation. Pip looked up at Sarah with pleading eyes and made soft, questioning sounds. The little creature was asking something, but Sarah couldn't quite grasp what. Then the lead alien approached again, carrying what looked like a translation device. It activated the device and spoke, its words coming through in slightly stilted but understandable English. "Small child of our hearts tells us you showed great kindness. You eased pain when you had no obligation. You treated young one as precious, not as curiosity." The alien scales shifted to patterns of deep respect. Such kindness is rare in the vastness of space. Our people honor those who show compassion to the vulnerable. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the formal recognition. Anyone would have done the same thing. Pip was in pain, and we couldn't just let it suffer. The alien's scales flickered in what might have been amusement. No gentle healer of pain. Many would not. "This is why you are honored," young one asks. "Would you consider learning ways of our people? There's much knowledge to share with those who understand that kindness transcends species." Sarah looked down at Pip, who was gazing at her with hope shining in its amber eyes. The little creature had found its family, but it didn't want to lose the connection it had formed with her. "What exactly are you asking?" Sarah said carefully. "Exchange of knowledge. Young one wishes to learn more of human ways of healing. We wish to teach methods of our people. It would require visiting. Young one would come sometimes to learn from you. You would be welcome among our people to learn from us." Sarah felt her heart leap with excitement. This wasn't goodbye. It was the beginning of something unprecedented. An exchange program between species, built on the foundation of compassion and trust that had started with a simple act of kindness toward a creature in pain. "I would be honored," Sarah said, and Pip's joyous response filled the corridor with the most beautiful music she had ever heard. 6 months later, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the first joint human Draconi research vessel, watching as teams of both species worked together in the laboratory below. The ship itself was a marvel of combined engineering, human efficiency blended with Draconi organic technology to create something neither species could have built alone. Pip, now noticeably larger, and bearing the intricate scale patterns that marked adolescence among its people, bounded up to Sarah with the enthusiasm it had never lost. The young Draconi had become something of a celebrity in both cultures, the bridge between species whose simple need for dental care had sparked the greatest advancement in interspecies relations in human history. "Sarah of gentle hands," Pip chirped in its musical voice, now fluent in both its native harmonies and a simplified version of English. "The new healing crystals work perfectly? The human patient with the broken bone will heal in half the normal time." Sarah smiled, marveling at how much had changed since that first frightening encounter. The Draconi, as they called themselves, had proven to be a species of healers and explorers. Their entire culture built around the principles of compassion and the pursuit of knowledge. Their medical technology, which used crystalline matrices to accelerate natural healing, had revolutionized human medicine. In return, human surgical techniques and pharmaceutical knowledge had provided the Draconi with solutions to medical problems they had struggled with for generations. "That's wonderful news." "Pip," Sarah said, using the human nickname that the young Draconi had proudly adopted. "How is Dr. Martinez adapting to the crystal healing methods?" "She learns quickly," Pip replied, its scales shimmering with pride, though she still makes the amusing face when the crystals sing to her. Humans have difficulty hearing the healing frequencies at first. Through the observation window, Sarah could see Dr. Martinez working alongside Thielen, one of the Draconi master healers. The sight still filled her with wonder, two completely different species sharing knowledge and techniques that benefited both their peoples. Commander Torres approached, now wearing the insignia of the newly created Interspecies Cooperation Division. "Dr. Chen, we've received word from Earth. The medical techniques you've developed here are being implemented in hospitals across all human colonies. The joint pain management protocols alone have helped millions of patients." Sarah felt a warm glow of satisfaction, but her attention was drawn to Pip, whose scales had suddenly shifted to patterns of excitement and anticipation. "What is it, little dragon?" she asked, using the affectionate term that had stuck despite Pip's protests that it was no longer little. "Elder Sings of Deep Waters wishes to speak with you," Pip announced formally. "It concerns the Great Project." Sarah's pulse quickened. The Great Project was something the Draconi elders had been discussing for months, a joint venture that would require unprecedented cooperation between the species. She had been hoping to be included, but as a relatively junior member of the research team, she hadn't dared to expect it. They made their way to the ship's center, where the Draconi had grown a living conference chamber. The walls pulsed gently with bioluminescent patterns, and the air itself seemed to hum with harmonic frequencies that promoted calm and clear thinking. Elder Sings of Deep Waters waited for them, along with Admiral Chen, no relation despite the shared surname representing the human colonial authority. The elder's scales displayed the complex patterns of advanced age and wisdom, while its eyes held the same kindness that Sarah had first seen in Pip. "Healer who sees beyond species," the elder addressed Sarah, using the formal name the Draconi had given her. "We have spoken much about the future of our peoples. The small act of kindness you showed to young Brightsongs in Starlight has grown into something neither species anticipated." Pip beamed at the use of its formal Draconi name, though Sarah noticed it still unconsciously touched the spot where its bad tooth had been, a reminder of where their journey had begun. Admiral Chen stepped forward. "Dr. Chen, what the elder is trying to tell you is that both our peoples have agreed to establish a permanent joint colony, a place where humans and Draconi can live and work together, sharing knowledge and culture on a scale never before attempted." Sarah felt her breath catch. A joint colony would be the ultimate expression of the cooperation that had grown from that first moment of compassion. "In a research station containment cell, the colony will need a chief medical officer," the elder continued, its scales shifting to patterns of hope and invitation. "Someone who understands both species, who has the trust of both peoples. Someone who remembers that healing transcends the boundaries of species." The offer hung in the air, and Sarah realized that everyone was waiting for her response. She looked at Pip, whose scales were cycling through patterns of excitement and encouragement. The young Draconi had grown from a frightened, injured creature into a bridge between worlds, and it had taught Sarah that the smallest acts of kindness could reshape the universe. "I accept," Sarah said simply, "with one condition." The elder tilted its magnificent head curiously. "Pip has to be part of the medical team," Sarah continued. "This all started because of this brave little dragon, and I can't imagine doing this work without my first Draconi friend." Pip's scales exploded into patterns of joy so bright they illuminated the entire chamber. The young Draconi launched itself at Sarah in a hug that lifted her off her feet, chittering with excitement in a mixture of English and harmonic Draconi. "Always together, Sarah of gentle hands," Pip sang. "Always healing, always helping." The elder's scales displayed patterns of deep satisfaction and approval. "It is fitting," it declared. "The bridge between species should be built by those who understand that pain is universal, but so is the capacity for compassion." As Sarah looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives of both species, she thought back to that moment 6 months ago when she had first decided to enter a containment cell to help a frightened, suffering creature. She had been following the simple principle that pain deserved attention, regardless of the species experiencing it. She could never have imagined that such a small act of kindness would lead to this, the beginning of a new chapter in galactic history, written by two species who had learned that the capacity for compassion was perhaps the most important thing they shared. Pip settled beside her, its scales displaying the pattern Sarah had come to think of as pure contentment, warm golds and blues that seemed to say, home. And she realized that home wasn't a place anymore. It was this connection between species, this shared commitment to healing and helping, this understanding that kindness was the most powerful force in the universe. In a small chamber on a joint research vessel, surrounded by the music of two species celebrating together, Sarah Chen smiled and began planning for a future where the phrase, "Come closer, little creature," would be spoken in a dozen languages, but always with the same meaning. You are safe, you are valued, and you are not alone in the vastness of space. The tiny dragon that had started it all curled up beside her, finally and completely at home, knowing that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the simplest act of kindness toward a creature in pain.